The only human in the room. Sarah Martinez tried not to roll her eyes as every head in the lecture hall turned to stare at her. Again. Xenozoology 101 had barely begun, and already she could feel the familiar burn of attention on her back, the kind that comes from being the only human in the room. The only Earthling in the entire Galactic Federation University, for that matter. The hall was massive, a cavern of smooth, curved stone and humming crystal. Its amphitheater-style seating accommodated students of every shape, size, and atmospheric requirement. A section near the back was reserved for aquatic species filled with hovering tanks or sealed suits. Others floated, shimmered, or pulsed with bioluminescence, and right in the middle of it all, like a sore thumb, sat Sarah. Human, mammal, Terran, Darton World native. She tucked a stray curl behind her ear and tried to focus on Professor Zix, who stood or rather balanced on a translucent pedestal near the front. The professor's body was a delicate lattice of crystalline structures that shimmered faintly under the soft lecture lighting. Sarah had learned that the slight flickers in their body indicated mood. Right now, the professor was amused. "And that," Professor Zix announced, their voice ringing like wind chimes over a canyon, "concludes our overview of Class 3 predatory species. Questions?" Of course her hand went up. And of course her classmates collectively leaned back like a slow tide, giving her a full, unobstructed spotlight. Sarah hated that part most, not the curiosity, not the attention, the isolation. "Yes, the human in the back," Zix said with that faint crystalline flicker, subtle. But Sarah had been at this school long enough to know it meant condescension. "My name's Sarah," she said politely. "I just had a quick question. I couldn't help but notice you didn't mention any oceanic predators from Earth in your classification. Where would something like a great white shark fall?" There was a pause, a long one. Zix's body glowed faintly, a shift toward amber pink, which Sarah now recognized as patronizing delight. Miss Martinez," Zix said, and Sarah braced herself. "While your enthusiasm is appreciated, Earth's aquatic life forms are generally considered Class 2 at most. Perhaps you're overstating their capabilities due to your species' naturally timid nature." A ripple of polite laughter rolled through the hall, high-pitched clicks, gurgling sounds, and ultrasonic chirps mixing together in a soft chorus. Sarah's jaw tightened. She felt her cheeks flush, not from embarrassment, but frustration. The kind that bubbled up when someone was confidently, completely wrong. She inhaled slowly, exhaled. She reminded herself she had promised her parents she'd try not to start anything this semester. Still, "With all due respect, Professor," she began, her voice calm, "I think there might be a misunderstanding about Earth's marine ecosystem." Zix raised an appendage, half encouragement, half challenge. "By all means." Sarah stood and reached into her satchel, pulling out her slim tablet. A few taps, and she had connected it to the lecture hall's holoprojector. The lights dimmed slightly, and a three-dimensional image of a great white shark shimmered to life above the stage. The reaction was immediate. A student in one of the water tanks recoiled so fast they bumped into the edge of their vessel, sloshing fluid over the side. Another, whose species resembled a sentient coral reef, let out a series of clicking gasps. Sarah stepped forward, letting the image rotate slowly above her. "This is Carcharodon carcharias, what we call the great white shark," she said. "They're apex predators, meaning nothing hunts them except, well, sometimes us." The shark twisted in the air, jaws slightly open, teeth gleaming. They can grow up to 6 meters long, weigh over 2 metric tons, and have been evolving their hunting methods for over 400 million years. A tentacled classmate to her left made a sound that resembled a wet gulp. Sarah didn't stop. "They can smell a drop of blood in 100 liters of water. Their bite can exert up to 18,000 newtons of force. Their teeth are serrated and self-replacing throughout their lives. Their skin is covered in microscopic scales called dermal denticles that reduce drag and allow them to swim silently at over 56 kilometers per hour." The room had gone silent. "I should also mention," she said, raising another hologram, that they can sense the electromagnetic fields given off by the heartbeats of other animals. And they've been observed breaching, leaping entirely out of the water while hunting seals. A low moan came from the front row. One of the students had pulled their own personal device and was searching for breaching shark footage. Sarah tried not to smirk. Zix's flicker had changed to a pale blue. Uncertainty, fascination, maybe even worry. That's quite impressive, Zix murmured. Still, surely these creatures have significant weaknesses. Oh, absolutely, Sarah nodded. They're not even our most dangerous marine predator. She tapped her tablet again, and up came an orca. This, she said, is an orca. Killer whale, largest member of the dolphin family. They hunt great white sharks for sport. They go after the liver, which they remove with surgical precision. A nervous squawk from the aquatic section. They also hunt in packs, coordinate using vocal signals, and teach their young how to do it. Generational learning, like us. Zix's pale blue glow dimmed even further. They've even cooperated with human whalers in the past, Sarah added casually. Historically, I mean. Herding other whales into bays in exchange for a portion of the catch. A gelatinous being in the third row suddenly raised 2 pseudopods in alarm. Sarah knew what was coming. The subtle shift. The sudden realization. The professor cleared their throat. Miss Martinez, I believe we may need to reevaluate our classification system. Perhaps a brief recess is in order while I consult with some colleagues. Of course, Sarah said sweetly. Would you like me to prepare a short overview of our terrestrial predators for the next section? I have some notes on honey badgers. Fascinating animals. Fierce. That won't be necessary. Zix's voice had gone up half an octave. Their structure was flickering faintly now, unmistakable signs of stress. As the lights brightened and the students dispersed for the break, Sarah sat down and smiled to herself. Maybe it wasn't exactly how she'd wanted to stand out on her first day back, but at least now they were starting to understand. Earth wasn't just a garden world. It was a crucible, and humans, they were forged in it. The room was dead silent. Sarah Martinez stood at the front of the massive lecture hall, her tablet still connected to the Federation holoprojector, the swirling 3D image of a great white shark hovering just above the stage. The predator rotated slowly in midair, jaws slightly open, rows of jagged triangular teeth on full display. The hologram shimmered in high resolution, giving it an almost eerie presence. A few aquatic students had unconsciously recoiled toward the back of the hall. One student, whose species resembled a humanoid octopus, had gone pale, all 6 of their eyes locked on the shark as if it might leap out of the hologram and attack them. Sarah didn't blame them. Most of these students came from oceanic planets with balanced ecosystems and advanced collective behavior. Beautiful places, sophisticated places, but none of them had oceans like Earth. Now, Sarah said, gesturing toward the projection, you might be wondering what makes this particular animal so terrifying. It's not just size or speed, it's specialization. She tapped her tablet and a new layer of information appeared beside the shark. Graphs, biological diagrams, sonar heat maps, bite pressure readouts. Great whites have been evolving for over 400 million years. They're not new. They're ancient survivors of multiple extinction events, perfected by time. She could feel the attention in the room sharpening. Professor Zix, standing off to the side, had stopped flickering entirely. That was rare. Sarah had come to recognize that as their version of being stunned. They can detect a single drop of blood in 100 liters of water, Sarah continued, her voice steady but passionate. They use an organ called the ampullae of Lorenzini, tiny electroreceptors around the snout that allow them to sense electromagnetic fields given off by the heartbeat of prey, even in pitch darkness. A holographic overlay showed the shark gliding through murky waters, zeroing in on the faint bioelectric pulse of an injured seal. They have up to 300 teeth at any given time, arranged in several rows. Serrated, razor sharp. And here's the best part, they constantly regenerate their teeth, A single shark can grow and lose over 20,000 teeth in a lifetime. Several students visibly shuddered. Sarah smiled politely, trying to maintain her professional tone. But inside, she felt a tiny flicker of satisfaction. She wasn't here to scare them, but she was absolutely here to correct them. Zix tried to recover. Yes, certainly an interesting predator. But surely such a creature must have significant limitations. There are more dangerous species in your oceans, you said. Oh, absolutely, Sarah said, pulling up a new hologram. I was just getting to them. The great white faded, replaced by a new figure, sleek, black and white, almost regal in appearance. This, she said, is the orca. You might know it by one of its other names, killer whale, though it's not a whale, technically. It's the largest member of the dolphin family. Professor Zix tilted their head. They hunt great white sharks, Sarah said bluntly. And they do it for fun. Gasps rippled across the room. They work in pods, highly intelligent groups that use complex vocalizations to coordinate hunting strategies. And they teach their young. Techniques are passed down, generation to generation, cultural learning. You'll find very few species in the galaxy that exhibit that behavior outside of sentient ones. The hologram shifted to footage of an orca pod circling a lone shark, driving it upward. A blow from below, and the shark flipped belly up vulnerable. The orcas didn't rush. They took turns. Surgical, calm. They target the liver, Sarah explained. Rich in fat and nutrients. They leave the rest of the shark untouched, and they've done this across several oceans, in different pods, independently. That means this isn't instinct, it's strategy. Professor Zix made a soft clicking sound. Their structure had shifted toward a pale cayenne, nervous. And they don't just hunt sharks. They've developed techniques to knock seals off ice floes by creating synchronized waves. And this part's my favorite: they've historically partnered with human whalers. Zix blinked. Partnered? Yes, Sarah nodded. In Australia, there are documented cases of orcas driving baleen whales toward human boats. They'd signal with tail slaps or surface displays, and in exchange, the whalers would leave part of the catch for the pod. That's interspecies cooperation. The class was utterly still. Have you ever heard of a predator that negotiates? She asked, more softly now. Because Earth has them. Zix didn't respond. I'm not done, Sarah said, swiping again. Now a massive, blocky shape filled the air above them. Gray, scarred, ancient. This is the sperm whale, Physeter macrocephalus, the largest predator to ever live on Earth. They dive into the darkest parts of our oceans, the midnight zone, to hunt creatures most of our own scientists still haven't seen with their own eyes. The projection showed a sperm whale descending into blackness, echolocation pulses echoing in tight, rhythmic bursts. They fight giant squid, real ones. We found scars from sucker discs the size of dinner plates across their bodies. These whales can hold their breath for over an hour and dive thousands of meters down. The pressure down there would crush most spacecraft hulls. Another student whimpered quietly. And their echolocation? Sarah added. So powerful it can stun prey, like a sonic weapon built into their biology. A tremor passed through the room. Sarah noticed some students were pulling up their own research, cross-referencing her data, watching video clips in hushed horror. And that's just a few examples, she said, stepping back from the holoprojector. We haven't even touched on the saltwater crocodile, or the box jellyfish, or the mantis shrimp, which can punch fast enough to create underwater shockwaves and temperatures close to the surface of the sun. Zix looked like they were swaying slightly. Sarah didn't stop. We have tigers that swim, snakes that glide through trees, octopi that solve puzzles and open jars, and jellyfish that might be biologically immortal. Our ecosystems aren't built around safety. They're built on pressure, on competition, on survival. Zix slowly raised a hand. Miss Martinez, I believe we may need to reassess our planetary classification systems. Would you mind preparing a short overview of your terrestrial predators after the break? Sarah smiled. Of course, Professor. I've got something on honey badgers queued up. Did you know they've been observed using tools and regularly fight off lions? Zix's voice rose half an octave. That will not be necessary. Class dismissed. Students began whispering among themselves as they gathered their things. Some looked shaken. A few looked curious. Sarah, for her part, just felt satisfied. Maybe now, finally, they'd understand. It wasn't dangerous by accident. It was dangerous by design. Sarah Martinez had barely returned to her seat when the first student fainted. It wasn't dramatic, more like a slow slide downward, as if the alien's jelly-like body simply gave up on supporting itself after witnessing a holographic clip of an orca surgically extracting a shark's liver. A soft squelch followed as it hit the floor. The med drones responded instantly. No one panicked. Apparently, fainting from shock wasn't uncommon among first-year xenobiology students. Still, it was a first for Sarah. She hadn't even gotten to the crocodiles yet. Professor Zix was hovering motionless at the front of the hall, their crystalline structure dim and flickering with an uncertain pale orange hue. Sarah had never seen that color on them before. It wasn't in the standard emotion reference guide. She suspected it might be the crystalline species version of existential crisis. Miss Martinez, Zix said slowly, voice an octave higher than usual. Perhaps it would be best if we took a brief recess. Sarah kept her tone polite. Of course, Professor. Would you like me to prepare slides on terrestrial predators for the next session? The professor visibly hesitated. A chorus of hushed whispers and nervous clicks filled the lecture hall as students turned to each other, still processing what they'd seen. Many were checking facts in real time, pulling up Terran wildlife videos, scientific articles, even human documentaries. One of the aquatic students had retreated into their portable tank and sealed it shut. Another was furiously scanning information about something called the pistol shrimp. Sarah sat quietly as the rest of the class filed out. She sipped from a water pouch and watched Zix converse with two other faculty members, both of whom kept throwing her sideways glances. Not hostile, not judgmental, just overwhelmed. By the time the class resumed 20 minutes later, the tone had shifted, dramatically. Professor Zix cleared their throat well, the equivalent gesture, and addressed the class with measured calm. Students, after consultation with the Xenobiological Classification Committee, we have decided to revise Earth's status from a Class 2 ecosystem to a provisional Class 5, Death World. The announcement echoed through the hall. Several students gasped. A few took notes with shaking appendages. One in the back started quietly praying in a dialect Sarah didn't recognize. And somewhere behind her, someone whispered, "I thought death worlds were theoretical." Sarah raised a brow but didn't say anything. "Not yet," Zix continued, visibly trying to maintain composure. This classification accounts not only for planetary conditions, gravity, atmosphere, radiation exposure, but also for biological threat potential, ecosystem volatility, and evolutionary aggression across all domains of life. They turned very slowly to face Sarah. "We owe this reassessment," Zix said, "to the comprehensive, and frankly alarming, data provided by Miss Martinez. Your first-hand insights into Earth's biosphere have proven invaluable, if somewhat unsettling." "Thank you, Professor," Sarah replied, giving a small nod. She was trying to stay professional, but inside, she was absolutely screaming with satisfaction. She hadn't expected to change the galaxy's perception of Earth in a single afternoon. But she'd take it. Zix hesitated again. "Furthermore, the faculty committee would like to request that you serve as an official consultant to help revise our curriculum concerning Earth's flora and fauna." Now that caught her off guard. "You want me to help teach?" she asked. Zix's color dimmed slightly. "Yes, with supervision, of course." Sarah grinned. "I'd be honored." And just like that, she was no longer just the human oddity at the back of the class. She was now the resident expert on what was, officially, the most dangerous ecosystem in the Galactic Federation's university system. She was just packing up her tablet after class when a curious group of students approached her table. At first, it was just a couple of them, one of the floating light beings and a bioluminescent amphibian, but within minutes, half the lecture hall had gathered around. Even the cleaning drones had paused. their optical sensors aimed squarely at Sarah. So, one student asked cautiously, "You were serious about honey badgers?" "Oh, completely," Sarah said, pulling up a new display. "They eat venomous snakes for breakfast and don't care if they get bitten. And they've been observed using tools." "Tools?" another student echoed. "Yeah." One climbed out of an enclosure by stacking logs under a wall, on purpose. It figured it out on its own. The light being pulsed in what Sarah had learned was their species' version of stunned silence. "Any peaceful animals?" someone else asked hopefully. "Surely Earth has herbivores that aren't violent." "Oh, we do," Sarah said. "But peaceful isn't the same as safe." She swiped again. "This is a hippopotamus. It's a herbivore, but it's responsible for more human deaths in Africa than lions or crocodiles combined. Territorial, aggressive, and fast. They'll capsize boats and chase predators for fun." The crowd went silent again. Someone whimpered when she showed a hippo biting a crocodile clean in half. By the end of the impromptu seminar, 3 students had submitted formal transfer requests to other departments. One had entered a light meditative state to regulate their internal fluid levels. A 4th simply left the building, mumbling something about rethinking career paths. Sarah didn't blame them. They still didn't know about the box jellyfish, or the cassowary, or the stonefish. She hadn't even mentioned that the platypus was venomous or that Earth's spiders had developed hunting nets, jumping mechanisms, and in one case, trapdoors with hinges. No, this was just the beginning. And it seemed word was spreading fast. That evening, she received a message on her tablet from the dean of the Exonobiology department. Sarah's eyes widened as she read the subject line. Request for special seminar series, Earth's Biosphere. The message was short, polite, and slightly panicked. They wanted her to teach a new elective course, open to students across all departments, dedicated entirely to Earth's life forms. Not just predators, everything. Animals, plants, fungi, bacteria. Full spectrum xenobiological review. Sarah chuckled softly to herself. She was still technically just a first-year undergrad, but here she was, being asked to educate the entire galactic academic community on why Earth might be the most insane place in the known universe. She tapped out a quick reply. "I'd be happy to. Should I start with deep-sea species? Or something a little lighter like wolves or hyenas?" The dean's response came minutes later. "Perhaps something less aggressive. Are there any harmless plant species you could begin with?" Sarah tilted her head, thinking. Harmless was subjective. She could probably find a few. Maybe ferns, maybe. Then again, some plants could walk, strangle trees, or even melt human flesh. She smirked. She'd start with the Venus flytrap. Nice and simple, cute. Carnivorous. Let them ease into the horror. After all, it wasn't every day your planet got reclassified as a death world. Might as well live up to the hype. The lecture hall was packed. Again. Word of Sarah's impromptu lecture on Earth's marine predators had spread across campus like wildfire. What started as a question during Xenozoology 101 had turned into a university-wide event. Now, students from every department were piling into the room: xenobotanists, defense analysts, even maintenance drones, all curious to learn more about Earth. But this time, Sarah had promised to keep things gentler. The email from Dean Lunks had been clear. Please begin the seminar series with the least nightmarish species possible. Something calming, perhaps plants, Sarah had agreed. She'd even rehearsed how she'd open soft voice, slow pacing, no violent holograms in the first 5 minutes. This was going to be a peaceful lecture. At least, that was the plan. She stepped up to the podium as a hush fell over the room. Even the floating crystal recorders near the ceiling had activated. Welcome to the first session of our new seminar series, Terran Biology Beyond the Classification System, she said. As requested, we'll start with plants. A collective sigh rippled through the room. Plants, after all, were safe. Harmless, peaceful, right? Sarah pulled up her first hologram. This, she said, is DNA Amicipula, commonly known as the Venus flytrap. The glowing 3D image spun slowly in midair, its green-toothed leaves opening and closing in an elegant rhythm. It's a carnivorous plant native to subtropical wetlands on Earth. It uses modified leaves to trap and digest insects. A few students murmured with curiosity. Sarah zoomed in on the inner surface of the trap, highlighting the tiny trigger hairs. When an insect touches 2 of these hairs within about 20 seconds, the trap snaps shut in less than a second. The plant then secretes digestive enzymes and slowly absorbs nutrients from its prey. A faculty member raised an appendage. "Miss Martinez, are you saying your planet's plants have evolved to eat animals?" "Some of them, yes," Sarah replied. "We've documented multiple genera of carnivorous plants. Like pitcher plants, they trap bugs in digestive fluid, or sundews, which use sticky tentacles, and bladderworts. They're aquatic and can suck in prey faster than any known plant movement in the galaxy, less than a millisecond." There was a pause. "But they're still rooted in place, correct?" someone asked, hopeful. "Well, most of them," Sarah said. "But Earth also has something called the walking palm tree." She tapped her tablet, and a new hologram appeared, a slender tree with exposed roots stretching outward like legs. It can walk by growing new roots in the direction it wants to move and letting old ones die off. Not fast, obviously, but it can relocate over time to get more sunlight. A few students leaned forward, fascinated. One of the light beings began pulsing rapidly in what Sarah had come to understand as intellectual excitement. "And then there's the strangling fig," she said, swiping to a new image. "It starts life up high in the canopy as an epiphyte. Then it sends roots downward and slowly envelops the host tree. Eventually, it chokes it to death and replaces it entirely." The class was growing quiet again. Sarah paused, noting the change in atmosphere, and softened her tone. "Look, I know this might sound aggressive, but evolution on Earth doesn't waste anything. Every species, plant or animal, has to fight for survival. Even our grass has silica in its blades to wear down the teeth of grazing animals over time." Now the room was very still. "And communication," she continued. "Some trees release chemicals into the air when they're attacked, warning others nearby to increase their defenses. Others send signals through underground fungal networks to share nutrients or alert each other to threats." She smiled. "We call it the Wood Wide Web." The translators struggled to convey the pun. A few students chuckled awkwardly. Most just stared. Dean Lumps's glowing strands pulsed dimly. "They communicate your plants?" "Yes," Sarah nodded. "It's not language the way we understand it, but it's biochemical messaging. Some species of acacia even call in predatory insects to defend them from herbivores." Several students were now taking furious notes. A crystalline student raised their appendage. "What's the most dangerous plant on Earth?" they asked cautiously. Sarah hesitated for a beat. Then she brought up her next slide. "This is the dendrocnide moroides, commonly known as the jimpy jimpi plant. It looks harmless, but its leaves are covered in tiny silica hairs that inject a neurotoxin on contact. The pain can last for weeks, in some cases, months. There are documented incidents of large animals and even humans driven to madness after exposure." A low hum passed through the room. "There are stories," she added, "of people choosing to shoot themselves rather than endure the pain. And it's not even deadly, just excruciating." Dean Lumps's light flickered in what could only be called distress. "Miss Martinez, I believe we may need to revisit our plant classification system as well." Sarah tried to keep her expression neutral. "That might be a good idea." She wasn't finished. "There's also the manchineal tree," she said, swiping again. "Its sap can cause chemical burns and blistering. Standing beneath it during rain is dangerous. It leaches toxins. Indigenous people used its sap to poison arrows." A student near the front nearly dropped their tablet. "Wait," one crystalline asked, voice brittle. "You identified these species, and then weaponized them?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Well, yes, but to be fair, we also studied plants for medicine, building materials, and food. Humans adapt. That's kind of our thing." She changed the slide again, now displaying mossy tundra, steaming volcanic springs, and frozen wastelands. "We also have extremophile plants. species that grow in near boiling water, or under permafrost, or in radioactive soil. Some even thrive without sunlight. The entire front row had stopped taking notes and were just watching her now, wide-eyed or the equivalent. A few droids had turned their internal recorders on. One of them projected a status report onto the wall. Recommended, upgrade Earth's flora risk profile immediately. Sarah pretended not to notice. We're actually researching some of these plants for off-world colonization, she continued. They're useful, strong, efficient, and surprisingly resilient. Dean Lunks raised a glowing tendril. And your fungi, Miss Martinez, are they equally robust? Sarah gave a knowing smile. Oh, wait till next week. The room was quieter than usual. Not because the students were bored, far from it. They were focused, intently focused. The kind of focus that comes with the quiet realization that everything you thought you knew about the universe might be wrong. Sarah Martinez could feel the shift. After only a few sessions, her seminar series had become the most heavily attended event at the Galactic Federation University. Today's topic was extremophiles life forms on Earth that defied logic, survived the impossible, and, in some cases, shrugged off death itself. She didn't even have to prompt the audience anymore. Students were already whispering excitedly when she walked in. Some had brought their own devices for research. A few had even started recording every session and sharing it with their homeworlds. Apparently, entire xenobiology departments across the galaxy were beginning to follow her lectures. And today's subject, it would only make things worse, or better, depending on your perspective. Sarah took the stage, tapped her tablet, and brought up the first hologram. Let's start simple, she said. This is Hypsibius Dujardini, but we call it a tardigrade. Yeah, a Yetterbear. The image of a pudgy, eight-legged microscopic creature appeared midair, rotating slowly. Some students leaned forward, confused. Others tilted their heads, trying to make sense of it. It's tiny, less than a millimeter long, but it's one of the most resilient organisms we've ever discovered. She paused, then ticked the list off on her fingers. Tardigrades can survive the vacuum of space. They've been exposed to solar radiation and cosmic rays and lived. They can handle temperatures from just above absolute zero to over 300 degrees Fahrenheit. They survive desiccation, total dehydration for years. And when the environment becomes inhospitable, they curl into a ton and just wait it out. A faint clicking ripple of astonishment passed through the audience. They can literally pause life. No heartbeat, no metabolism. And then, years later, come back as if nothing happened. Dean Lunks's shimmering light strands pulsed slowly. How is this possible? They produce unique proteins that protect their DNA and cellular structures from damage. And scientists on Earth are currently studying those proteins to see if we can use them to protect human cells from radiation exposure, especially during space travel. A crystalline student raised an appendage. Are you telling us your species is using these organisms for technology? Sarah nodded. We're not just studying them. We're learning from them. Earth's most extreme life forms are like miniature instruction manuals for survival. She tapped again. A new image appeared. A worm curled at the edge of a volcanic vent. This is the Pompeii worm Alvanella pompejana. It lives in hydrothermal vents at the bottom of our oceans, where temperatures exceed 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Most organisms would boil. This one thrives. It uses symbiotic bacteria on its back to insulate itself. Another swipe. This is Deinococcus radiodurans, or Conan the bacterium. It can survive thousands of times the radiation that would kill a human. It can also handle desiccation, acid baths, and high temperatures. We've found it living inside nuclear reactors. Someone in the back gasped softly. Sarah smiled faintly. We're studying this bacterium to see if it can help clean up radioactive waste. Earth's biosphere might look dangerous, but it's also full of potential. Adaptation is what we do. A voice near the side of a room, a gaseous being with a low, vibrating tone, spoke up. You mentioned earlier that some of your species deliberately seek these organisms out. Absolutely, Sarah said. We have scientists who dive into deep-sea trenches, hike through sulfuric hot springs, drill into Antarctic ice, all to find life that shouldn't exist. Why? The being asked, genuinely confused. Sarah shrugged. Because if it exists on Earth, it might exist somewhere else. And if we understand how life survives there, maybe we'll know what to look for on other planets. Some of our most advanced ideas about terraforming and space colonization have come from studying these extremophiles. The dean raised another tendril. Could you elaborate on that? Sarah pulled up another slide, this time a diagram of a potential Mars habitat. We've been experimenting with radiation-resistant bacteria to line spacecraft walls. There's also a fungus Cladosporium spherospermum that absorbs radiation. We're looking into using it for self-healing habitat walls on other planets. Someone from the maintenance division buzzed excitedly. And tardigrades might be the key to keeping human cells safe during long-term space travel. Their proteins could be genetically engineered into crops, making them more resistant to heat, drought, and radiation. One of the insectoid students raised a trembling claw. So you're not just surviving these threats, you're turning them into tools? Sarah smiled. That's kind of humanity's thing. Another image appeared, this time of a glowing red lake. This is Lake Natron in Africa. Its water is so alkaline it can calcify animals. And yet, a species of fish, Alcalapia alcalica, lives in it, thrives even. Its adaptations might help us design better filtration systems for toxic environments. She paused. Earth doesn't make things easy. It never has. Our life forms were built under pressure, sometimes literally. And instead of fleeing, we adapted. Dean Lund spoke again, this time more carefully. Miss Martinez, the Federation Science Council has expressed growing concern. Not only does your planet harbor life forms capable of surviving extreme environments, but your species actively studies and replicates them. Sarah nodded slowly. I understand the concern, but you have to remember we're not doing this to conquer or destroy. We do it to survive, to explore, to learn. There was silence. And then a crystalline student asked in a hushed voice, do you have any microorganisms that affect other species? Sarah hesitated, then changed the slide again. This is a prion, she said quietly. It's not alive in the traditional sense. It's a misfolded protein, but when it comes into contact with other proteins, it causes them to misfold too. Like a chain reaction. No DNA, no metabolism. Just corruption. There were audible murmurs now, and we found them naturally occurring. In our cattle, in our wildlife, even in humans. A soft chime interrupted. Sarah glanced at her tablet. Another message from the Science Council. Please schedule a closed-door session to discuss the military implications of extremophile research. She exhaled through her nose. Not surprised. Not even bothered. Just tired. Look, she said to the room. Humans aren't the most dangerous species on Earth. We're just the only ones who know how dangerous the rest of it is. And we've spent our entire existence learning to live alongside it. She glanced around. Some students looked intrigued. Others looked horrified. A few looked like they might pass out. Sarah paused one last time. I haven't even told you about the parasites yet. Sarah Martinez stood at the center of the auditorium, now fully accustomed to the standing room only crowds her seminars attracted. Today, though, there was a different kind of tension in the air. Lurking near the back of the hall, half in shadow, stood a group of Galactic Defense Force officials. They were easy to spot, taller, broader, clad in dark reflective armor, most of them with some variation of exoskeleton or external plating. They weren't here for fun. Today's topic had caught their attention early: Earth's insects. One officer in particular had Sarah's attention, a massive beetle-like being named General Vex Thor, whose metallic exoskeleton caught the light with every subtle shift. He hadn't taken a seat. He simply stood, arms folded, watching her with a quiet intensity that said, "We're listening, don't hold back." Sarah tapped her tablet, and the hollow projector blinked to life. The image of a small, reddish-brown ant filled the air. "This is Adacephalotes, a species of leaf-cutter ant," she began. They're about the size of your fingernail, but don't let the size fool you. A murmur rolled through the students seated below. Leafcutter ants are farmers. They don't eat the leaves they cut. They bring them back to their nests and use them to cultivate a specific fungus. This fungus is their food source. She switched slides, showing a cross-section of a colony. These nests can span up to 50 meters underground. They're air-conditioned, compartmentalized. Some chambers are for farming, others for raising young, storing waste, or guarding the queen. A student raised a translucent appendage. They cultivate and organize their colonies. They also practice sanitation, Sarah continued. They carry waste to designated trash chambers far from the fungus gardens. And here's where it gets interesting. Some ants produce antibiotics on their exoskeletons to prevent mold and bacterial infections. In other words, they invented medicine millions of years ago. There was stunned silence. General Vex Thor slowly tilted his head. You're saying these insects have agriculture, infrastructure, waste management, and pharmaceuticals? Sarah nodded. And warfare. She swiped again. Leafcutter ants wage war against rival colonies, sometimes against other species entirely. They'll send scouts, form attack squads, and even take slaves from conquered nests. They recognize friends from enemies using chemical cues. Vex Thor turned to one of his officers, who is now furiously recording notes into a datapad. But that's just leafcutters, Sarah said. Let me show you Esiton Burchelli army ants. The hologram shifted to a mass of writhing bodies, forming what looked like a moving mat. Army ants don't build permanent nests. They're nomadic. Their colony is a living organism, a constantly shifting swarm that moves together across the jungle, consuming everything in its path. She tapped again. They form living bridges with their bodies, rafts during floods, and war columns that can overwhelm prey thousands of times their size. Their jaws can shear through chitin, flesh, even lightweight armor. Individually, nothing special. Collectively, unstoppable. A voice came from the front. It was low, metallic. General Vex Thor. How are these formations directed? Is there a central command? There's a queen, Sarah said, but no commander per se. And colonies operate on distributed intelligence. They follow pheromone trails, communicate chemically. Each individual follows simple rules, but together, they behave like a single mind. The general went quiet, but the tension in his posture deepened. A few of his subordinates exchanged nervous glances. Some scientists believe ant colonies demonstrate a form of collective consciousness, Sarah continued. We've modeled swarm-based AIs after them. Even human military tactics have been inspired by their coordination. She didn't wait for another question. The room was too silent, too still. She was just getting started. Now let's talk about Myrmecia, better known as Australian jumping ants. The new image showed a glossy, aggressive-looking ant with long legs and oversized mandibles. They can jump up to 4 times their body length. Their venom is potent enough to trigger anaphylaxis in humans. They're extremely territorial and will attack anything that gets close. She glanced at the Defense Force contingent. We've actually used them in field tests to evaluate the durability of military gear under swarm pressure. That drew an audible reaction. One of the crystalline students raised a shaky appendage. B, but these are small creatures. You said they're tiny. Most insects are, Sarah confirmed. But scale doesn't mean weakness. Earth's insects dominate by biomass. There are an estimated 10 quintillion individual insects on our planet. For every human, there are about 200 million insects. Just ants alone weigh roughly the same as the total mass of all humans on Earth. There was a moment of stunned silence. And we're still discovering new species, Sarah added. Another voice spoke up, this one from a strategist in the front row. Do any of them possess cognitive abilities? Plenty, Sarah said. Honeybees can recognize human faces, perform basic arithmetic, and engage in democratic decision-making when selecting new hive sites. They dance literally to communicate the direction and distance of resources. And they make group decisions with incredible accuracy. She paused, then smiled faintly. But if it's firepower you're after, let me introduce the bombardier beetle. She swiped to a beetle with a cartoonishly oversized abdomen. This beetle mixes two chemical compounds in a special chamber in its body and ejects them in a boiling hot, high-pressure spray. The explosion is loud enough to scare predators. It can do this repeatedly. The reaction occurs just before ejection inside its abdomen without harming itself. General Vex Thor stared at the image. "You have an insect," he said slowly, "that carries internal chemical weapons and uses them defensively." Sarah nodded. "Oh, and assassin bugs? They use the corpses of their prey as camouflage. Antlions, they dig pit traps and wait underground. Glowworms build silk threads in the dark and mimic ambient light to catch prey mid-air." The strategist raised a hand again, voice strained. "So what you're saying is, Earth's insects have mastered stealth, ambush tactics, psychological warfare, and biochemical defense." "Pretty much," Sarah said. "And we haven't even gotten to spiders." Dean lumps flickered near the side of the room, visibly uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should pause." But the general interrupted. "No," he said firmly. "This is valuable information. Continue." Sarah nodded, but her voice softened. "You asked how we made it to space despite living on a world full of creatures like this." She stepped forward, making eye contact with as many students and officers as she could. "We adapted. We learned to observe, to research, to understand. That's how we survived." And then, just as the room began to relax, she added one last note. "Oh, one more thing. Did I mention dragonflies? Fossil records show they used to have wingspans over 2 feet wide during the Carboniferous period. They probably hunted small reptiles in flight." The silence that followed was absolute. General Vex Thor looked down at his datapad. Then at Sarah. Slowly, he nodded. "Miss Martinez," he said, "the Galactic Defense Council will be requesting a full dossier on your planet's insect life immediately. And we may need to reevaluate containment protocols. For everything." Sarah smiled, packed up her tablet, and slung her bag over her shoulder. They still hadn't asked about the parasites. Not yet. It started with a buzz. Not the kind you hear, but the kind you feel a shift in the air, a subtle tension crackling behind every conversation. Sarah Martinez had grown used to drawing attention on campus, especially after her seminar series exploded in popularity. But this wasn't the usual excited murmuring or curious stares. This was silence, watched silence. The Galactic Federation had taken notice. Specifically, the Security Council. Sarah got the message in the middle of reviewing a hologram of a parasitoid wasp. She was just about to explain how it laid its eggs inside a live host, turning its victim into both nursery and food source, when her tablet pinged with a priority message. "Urgent. High Commissioner Radiant will attend today's lecture. Security detail incoming." She blinked at the screen, then looked up. Students were already turning in their seats, whispering. The doors at the back of the auditorium opened, and in stepped the High Commissioner, a tall figure composed entirely of coherent energy waves, humanoid only in outline. Behind him came members of the Galactic Defense Force, all wearing the same grim expressions as General Vex Thor. No fanfare. No introductions, just silent presence. Sarah took a slow breath and closed the wasp hologram, probably a wise move. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady despite the tension. "Today was supposed to be about parasitic adaptations, but we're going to take a slight detour." She glanced at the commissioner. He gave a subtle nod. "We'll be discussing Earth's biological systems as they relate to space exploration and potential cross-contamination protocols." That, at least, sounded technical. "Neutral. Safe." She tapped her tablet, bringing up a rotating hologram of a tardigrade. "We've already discussed some of Earth's extremophiles organisms that survive heat, cold, radiation, vacuum. Things that would kill most life in the galaxy." "Correct," the commissioner said, his voice a deep harmonic vibration that resonated throughout the room. "And your species studies these organisms. Why?" Sarah didn't flinch. "To understand survival, to explore, and to adapt what we learn for off-world environments. For example, Tardigrade proteins might one day help protect human cells from radiation in space. Fungal mycelium can be used to grow self-repairing building materials. And certain bacteria can recycle waste or process toxic soil. She brought up a second display, a prototype of an Earth-designed biodome on Mars. Oxygen produced by algae, waste broken down by microbes. Walls reinforced with living mycelium. We're not weaponizing these organisms, Sarah continued. We're learning from them. Earth is a harsh place. So we became researchers, engineers, survivors. The commissioner remained quiet for a moment. Then he turned to General Vex Thor, who had taken a seat at the edge of the front row, arms folded across his armored chest. The question before us is simple, the commissioner said. Given what we now know about Earth's biological volatility, should this world be admitted to the Galactic Federation? A stunned silence followed. Sarah's mouth went dry. She hadn't expected that. The commissioner turned back to her. Miss Martinez, would you care to make a statement on behalf of your species? Sarah swallowed. She hadn't prepared for this. She was a student, a biologist, not a diplomat. But this was happening. Right now. She stepped away from the podium and looked at the crowd students. Faculty, military officials, artificial intelligence units, even a few independent observers who had tuned in remotely. Dozens of species, hundreds of eyes. Earth isn't safe, she said plainly. I won't pretend it is. A ripple of murmurs. But danger isn't the whole story. Our planet is full of life. It's complex, brutal, beautiful. And in all that chaos, we learned something vital. We learned how to coexist. Not just with each other, but with everything else. We study what scares us. We don't run from it. We investigate it. We try to understand it. She paced slowly. I know you're worried. I get it. You've seen the predators, the parasites, the plants that walk, the insects that wage war. But that's not the part that should scare you. She stopped and turned to the commissioner. What should scare you is that we survived all of it. We didn't just evolve next to these organisms, we endured them, studied them, and are now using what we've learned to build something better. She let that settle. We're not asking to join the Federation to spread danger. We're asking because we think we can contribute. Not just biologically, but intellectually, socially, culturally. The commissioner was still for several long seconds. Then slowly, he turned back to the council members watching remotely via projection. Their forms flickered crystalline, gaseous, even plasma-based. They whispered in electromagnetic pulses, shared rapid thought clusters, consulted risk matrices. After a moment, their decision came. Effective immediately, the commissioner said. Earth is to be granted provisional full membership in the Galactic Federation. A stunned silence followed. Then an eruption of noise. Not cheers, not applause. Just a collective intake, the sound of hundreds of species realizing what had just happened. Sarah exhaled and stepped back. But the commissioner wasn't finished. In addition, he said, a scientific monitoring station will be established in orbit around Earth. Ongoing research into Terran life forms will be supervised by Federation biocontainment experts. Vex Thor stood. I recommend we also update defensive protocols regarding Earth-originating vessels, containment standards, crew screening, biological shielding. The commissioner nodded. Approved. Ms. Martinez, you will serve as our first Terran advisor on the Xenobiological Defense Committee. Sarah blinked. I'd be honored. She tried to smile, but her brain was still catching up. She had just helped rewrite humanity's place in the galaxy, and all she'd really done was talk about insects. As the hole slowly cleared, students came up one by one, some curious, some visibly disturbed, some just wanting to say thank you. Sarah answered questions until her throat hurt. Hours later, she sat alone in the now empty auditorium, her tablet resting on her lap. Another message came through, from Dean Lunks. Congratulations. Also, please be gentle next week. Perhaps something peaceful? Like butterflies. Sarah smiled tiredly and began typing. Of course, did you know some butterflies taste with their feet? And some caterpillars mimic venomous snakes to avoid predators? She paused, then typed one last line. Maybe I'll ease them in with something really gentle. Like the parasitic fungi that turn ants into zombies. She hit send and leaned back in her chair. Welcome to the Federation, Earth. Try not to scare them too fast. Sarah Martinez hadn't planned on becoming the face of Earth's biological identity in the galaxy. She'd come to the Galactic Federation University to study. That's it, a xenobiology scholarship, a handful of credits to finish her degree, and maybe a quiet research position somewhere with ocean access and strong coffee. She never imagined she'd be giving standing room-only lectures under security escort. Or that her casual mention of cassowaries would trigger 3 diplomatic inquiries and a temporary lockdown of the biology wing. But after the Federation approved Earth's membership and added a permanent orbital observation station, things escalated. Fast. Every faculty member wanted her insights. Every planetary representative wanted assurances. And every species, it seemed, had suddenly realized they might be sharing a galaxy with a death world wrapped in rainforest and teeth. The worst part, she hadn't even gotten to the really bad stuff yet. So when Professor Zix, still flickering with residual stress colors from the last seminar, cautiously asked if she could prepare something a little less alarming for the next session, Sarah smiled. She was going to try. Today, she said brightly, stepping up to the lectern in front of a packed auditorium, we'll be exploring some of Earth's lesser-known organisms. Some of them are small, some are strange, some are, well, objectively horrifying. But all of them reveal just how creative evolution can be when left unsupervised. The crowd leaned in. Even the security detail, usually bored and expressionless, seemed oddly alert. Sarah brought up her first hologram. This is Saculina carcini, a parasitic barnacle. It infects crabs. Sabs. The image of a crab filled the air, followed by a time lapse of the parasite attaching itself, then injecting tendrils into the crab's body. It rewires the host's nervous system, suppresses its immune response, alters its hormones. Eventually, the crab stops reproducing, stops growing, and begins caring for the parasite's offspring as if they were its own. One of the amphibian students let out a horrified gurgle. It doesn't kill the crab, Sarah added. It just takes over, slowly, quietly, permanently. She changed the slide. This is Ophiocordyceps unilateralis. We call it zombie ant fungus. A few students visibly tensed. It infects ants, then manipulates their behavior. The infected ant climbs to a high, humid location ideal for fungal growth and latches onto a branch. The fungus then sprouts out of the ant's head, releasing spores to infect the next wave of hosts. Professor Zix made a sharp crystalline clink halfway between a cough and a nervous tick. It's incredibly precise, Sarah went on. The ant's death grip is triggered by muscle contractions induced by the fungus. It climbs to the exact elevation needed for optimal spore dispersion. Some species of the fungus even time their spore release based on humidity and wind direction. A maintenance droid in the back muttered something that sounded like reassessing pest control protocols. Sarah smiled. And if that's not enough, there's more. Earth's parasites don't just control movement, they control behavior. She brought up the next image, Toxoplasma gondii. This one lives in rodents, but it can only reproduce inside cats. So it rewires the rodent's brain to make it attracted to feline urine. It literally makes the prey walk toward the predator. There was a stunned pause. One of the light beings began vibrating erratically. We found traces of it in humans too, Sarah added casually, still studying the long-term effects. Professor Zix held up a hand. Miss Martinez, I believe we've exceeded today's emotional tolerance quota. But a voice cut in from the audience. Are there more? All heads turned. It was one of the students from the Defense Department. Pale, wide-eyed, holding a datapad like a shield. Sarah tilted her head. You want more? He hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, Sarah pulled up a new slide. Okay. This is the tongue-eating louse. Groans rippled through the room. It swims into a fish's mouth, attaches to its tongue, and begins feeding on blood. Eventually, the tongue withers away. The parasite then replaces the tongue, acting as a fully functional organ. The fish survives. It eats. The parasite gets fed. Silence. Silence. You see, she continued, humans aren't the biggest threat on our planet. We're just the ones who know what's out there. Another slide. Glowing worms. These live in caves. They spin sticky threads from the ceiling like fishing lines. They glow with bioluminescence to lure flying prey into the dark. Then they reel them in and eat them alive. Another hagfish. This one produces so much slime that it can clog a predator's gills. It has no jaw, no spine, but it's been around for over 300 million years. Another, Candiru, the infamous Amazonian parasite, known to follow urea trails into fish gills. There's some debate about how far it'll follow a urea stream. I'll leave that one to your imagination. At this point, even the security officers looked uncomfortable. Sarah tapped one final slide. And then there's the bobbit worm, lives in the ocean floor, waits motionless, then snaps upward with jaws so fast they can sever prey in half. It's nearly invisible until it strikes. The hologram played on a loop grainy underwater footage of a small fish swimming along, then vanishing in a blur of sand and jaws. Sarah folded her arms. These creatures, parasites, ambush predators, biochemical hackers, are part of why Earth was upgraded to a Class 5 death world. Not because they're big, not because they're strong, but because they're smart, persistent, and terrifyingly effective. She paused, watching the weight of the room settle into silence. And I haven't even touched viruses, bacteria, or symbiotic weaponization yet. At that, Professor Zix finally stood up, flickering with such rapid color changes that the translator struggled to keep up. Ms. Martinez, as chair of the Ethnobiological Safety Council, I am placing an official recommendation that Earth's full biological profile be subjected to a long-term, multi-phase threat assessment. Sarah blinked. Is that bad? It's not good, Zix muttered. You may have single-handedly rewritten the Federation's planetary risk doctrine. Again, Dean Lum's added from the side. We request that your next seminar involve something less likely to induce existential despair. Perhaps coral reefs? Sarah grinned. Sure, they're pretty, colorful, cooperative. She paused. Though some of them do produce neurotoxins. And we've got this one sea cucumber that defends itself by launching its internal organs like class dismissed, Zix shouted, voice cracking for the first time. The students scattered. The military whispered among themselves. The commissioner was already tapping out messages to the Federation Security Council. Sarah gathered her tablet, slung her bag over her shoulder, and smiled to herself. There was still so much more to share. She hadn't even started on Earth's bacteria yet, or fungi with memories, or the possibility that some species could communicate across entire forests. One step at a time, she had an entire galaxy to educate and a planet full of nightmares to explain.